Hello friends, Will here. Welcome to the Skate Oasis. And today, welcome to the workshop. So a couple of years ago, I built a couple of quarter pipes for my friend Evan. Evan, I hope those are working out for you. And he gave me an idea that maybe on the side, I should start contracting my services to build some skate ramps. So I have an ad up on Facebook Marketplace advertising my services. And about a week ago, I started talking with this nice guy named David, who watches the channel. Hey, David. And he wanted me to build him a skate ramp for his garage. And I jumped at the opportunity because I love doing this. I love spreading the stoke, and I also really love building stuff. So David wanted something that gave him a little bit of variety in his skating. He really liked the idea of a quarter pipe, but also really liked the idea of a grind ledge. Luckily, there are some products on the market that provide both of these elements of skating. The two that I'm thinking of are the Keen Ramps Transition Ledge 2.0, I think it's called. And we also have the OC Ramp Greg Lutzka signature quarter pipe. Both those companies are located in California. Very expensive to get those here. So I gave David a price. He said yes, and we're gonna go. I'm taking some design inspiration from both of those ramps, and we're gonna go over the designs and talk about it. I'm gonna talk about all the materials that I'm gonna use and the tools that I'm gonna use. I'm gonna show you the whole build process and how to build this ramp yourself if you so desire. The ramp basically combines like a micro quarter pipe on one side with a grind ledge on the other side. So the ramp that I'm gonna build for David is 1 foot high, about 3'6" long, and 4 feet wide. So let's take a look at the materials I'm gonna be using first. So this is my mini ramp, basically building David's ramp with the same construction materials that I used to build this ramp. We have 3/4 inch standard plywood for the frames, 2x4 framing members across. The ramp riding material is made of 2 layers of 3/8 inch plywood, and the top riding surface is 1/4 inch hardwood plywood. This is Meranti plywood, but you can also use birch or oak or whatever you have. You could even just use the 3/8 plywood, but I really like the hardwood because it gives everything a really, really nice finish. On my mini ramp, I actually upcycled some old fence posts for the coping, but what I'm using for David is this 4-foot piece of 40 gauge steel. This is 2.5 inches in diameter. This is the only thing I couldn't find at my local hardware store, so I contacted a local metal supplier here in town and they hooked me up. So if you're having trouble finding this, try that. You could also use like fence posts. You can use PVC if you want, but I wanted to use metal because metal is so satisfying to grind on. Please forgive the state of my garage. It's really dirty in here. I already did some work, and it's not a workshop, so go easy on your boy. But let's take a look at the tools we're gonna use. So you need a circular saw for straight cuts and cutting the studs, a jigsaw for cutting the curved part of the transition frames, and you need an impact driver or a power drill for screwing and drilling the pieces. Heavy duty tape measure. These are clamps, which we're gonna use to clamp the frames together when we sand them and cut them. You're also gonna want to have a pencil or a Sharpie of some kind. Duct tape is also incredibly useful in construction just for holding stuff together. Some sort of a straight edge or a speed square is an indispensable tool. Anytime you are cutting or using saws, you should wear safety goggles. You only get one set of eyes, so protect them. Good pair of gloves is important to protect your hands. And also, guys, I'm a musician. I'm a lifelong guitar player, and I really believe in ear protection. This is just a pair of Bluetooth headphones that I'm going to use to listen to my audiobook while I use my power tools. So those are all of the materials and the tools that I'm going to be using for this project. Let's take a look at the frame. I have a basic outline of my transition shape drawn here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this, and then we're going to use this as a template to cut the second side. This is going to be 12 inches tall. It's going to be about 14.5 inches of decking. There's our coping, the studs to support the coping and the decking and the back. And I haven't drawn the transition curve yet, but what I've done here is I've plotted a straight line across to 3.5 feet to the back because that's the size I want it to be. And then after I cut this out, I'm going to measure a curve and I'm going to go back with the jigsaw and I'm going to cut a nice curve into this. So that takes us to our first step, which is going to be cutting the transition frames out. So let's get our gear on, let's set up the camera, and let's get to work. So now we have the basic frame shape cut out. We are gonna grab the jigsaw and we're gonna cut out this circular section where the coping is gonna fit right in. Okay, so we've got that shape cut out. The coping fits really nicely. So I'm gonna trace this out on the other sheet of 3/4 inch plywood. Then we're going to combine them to cut the actual curve of the transition. I've sanded down and adjusted some of the cuts here. I also drilled these handles so that you can just pick up the ramp and move it around really easily. I've drawn my transition line and now it's time to cut it. So my next step is painting the transition frames. And then once they're dry, we're gonna attach them together again, and I'm gonna drill all the pilot holes that I need to put all the studs in place so everything's nice and perfect, and then we're gonna start framing this thing. It's a couple hours later, we're back in the garage. The frames are pretty much dry enough for me to work with, and I've set up this kind of jig for setting them up here. So I've got my plywood laid in the 4-foot direction and I've got a couple of cinder blocks in the way. I've got my studs and I just have some scrap pieces of 3/4 inch in there to hold. I'm gonna replace these with the frames and then we're gonna start screwing this together and frame it out. This is where it starts to get a little bit more exciting because we can actually see the ramp taking shape. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. I have the bottom stud in, as well as the coping support stud, as well as all of the decking installed. So now I just need to install a couple more joists across this way, and then we can start surfacing this. Let's get back to it. Killer. So the next thing I'm gonna do is put the finishing sheet on the deck here, which is made of the same thing as our riding surface, our 1/4 inch hardwood Meranti plywood. So I've already measured this. That's 15 inches edge to edge. So I've just gotta cut a piece off of that, 4 feet by 15 inches. So now what I'm gonna do is close in the back and put together the grind ledge. So I wanna close this in because if David's doing no slides or popping over it or whatever, you don't want to have that wide open. It's nice to have some wood covering that. So I'm gonna start attaching the back pieces. I'm gonna put the angle iron together and we're gonna put it on. Let's check it out. Okay, so this is what the ramp is looking like right now. I have all my joists in place, the coping is in place, the decking is done, the grind side of the ledge is almost done. I just have to patch the bottom with masonite. And then I am gonna start cutting up the plywood sheets to surface this thing, and then we're done. Good morning, everyone. I ran out of light last night, so I had to quit working on the ramp at about 8:30 or so. But it's nice and early here Sunday morning and I'm back at it. Let's take a look and see where we kind of left it yesterday and what my next steps are. It's all framed out. The top and rear are attached and ready to go, and I think they're looking pretty nice. Our next step is actually to take our 3/8 of an inch plywood and we're gonna cut one sheet in 2-foot strips for the first layer. And then the second layer, we're gonna cut a 1 foot a 1 foot and a 2 foot piece out of it, just so that when this lies on top of the first layer, the seams don't overlap. And then the top layer, the 1/4 inch hardwood, is gonna be cut right down the middle, 2 and 2, so that its seams don't line up with the second layer. Make sense? Okay, first layer's on. It looks like a quarter pipe. Let's move on to the second layer. Okay, both of the sub-layers are on, so now it's time for us to put on our final riding surface. I did also remove the coping temporarily because I did miscalculate a tiny bit when I cut the coping notch, and I didn't factor in for 2 layers of 3/8 plywood, so there really wasn't any bonk when I was testing it out. So I'm gonna install the top sheet and then precision install the coping so there's just a nice little bonk when you get to the top. Yeah, so we're getting close to the finish line now. I'm getting really excited to test this thing out. Top sheet is on, looks really nice, really smooth. The curve looks really nice. So now it's time to precision place the coping again. So what I did here initially was cut this circular hole here, which is actually just a little bit too deep. So what I'm doing is I have these scraps of masonite that I'm going along and just kind of putting in here to raise the coping up a little bit. Then we're gonna force the coping down to sit on top of this, and it's gonna be nice and snug. Coping's a very snug fit in there, so we're going to use a special carpentry and building skill that I like to call percussive encouragement. We're gonna kick it and hit it with a mallet. It works! Now that we have smashed and stomped the coping back into submission, into its spot, it's in a really good place, so I'm gonna grab my titanium drill bits and we're gonna drive some screws through it into the stud below, so the coping is gonna be rock solid. Okay, so the coping's all done. Let's attach the threshold. So I made another slight miscalculation here. This threshold material that I bought yesterday from the hardware store, it's just too flimsy to use as a threshold. I took a couple of runs at it and it already was bending a little bit. But luckily I have this. This is a piece of, I believe this is 1/8 sheet metal, steel, and I've actually already got it drilled and countersunk. I used this on the Stevo ramp when I still had it. Now it's a little bit thicker, so what I'm actually gonna do is go back and I'm gonna cut the top sheet 3 inches up from the bottom. This is a 1/4 inch thick. The sheet metal is 1/8 of an inch thick. So when I cut this down and put the sheet metal in there will be a difference of 1/8 of an inch, but you'll never notice because the ramp is nice and mellow. It's gonna be nice and smooth. I've already adjusted my circular saw. I'm not even gonna bother bringing up the sheet because I've just made the blade pretty much as shallow as it can go. So let's cut this thing. It's time to be a responsible builder and test the product that I'm selling. I owe it to David to shred this thing and make sure that it works as intended. So let's set the camera and let's skate. Okay, everybody, I am pooped. So that is going to be the end of the skate session, and it's also going to be the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. This was an incredibly fun project. It's a super fun obstacle. I really want to build one of these for myself. It's just really playful and really fun. So if you have any questions at all about the ramp or about this video or about anything, and even if you just want to say hi, drop me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you've seen, you can subscribe to the channel down here, and you can click up here to watch another video. So until next time, I've been Will. You've all been amazing. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll see you on the flip side.